7 o'clock in Gardner, Kansas. The Planning Commission is September 26th, 2022 is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, start to my right.
Commissioner Souza here.
Commissioner Ham here.
Commissioner Hanson here.
Commissioner McNear here. Adriana?
Commissioner Mater here.
We have a quorum. First agenda item is the consent agenda. All matters listed in the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the Planning Commission for study. These items are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item from either the Planning Commission or from the floor, then that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Do we have a motion to approve that?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
A motion by Ham and second by Hanson. I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. First item. University Park Apartments. I'm sorry. Oh, that's what happened. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. First item on the agenda tonight is Santa Fe self-storage. Staff, do we have a presentation?
Yes, we do. So this is item 1A, 1B, and 1C, a rezoning and associated preliminary development plan and final development plan for Santa Fe self-storage. The site is about 5 acres in size. It was originally platted in 1997, but has been vacant ever since. Staff has found that this parcel will need to be replatted because the 5-acre parcel was sold off at one point, and so there's a lot line there that needs to be officially platted, and we've found that it can be done administratively, so there's a condition of approval that the administrative plat be passed or accepted by the staff. The site is zoned C2, and it is being proposed to be rezoned to CP2, a planned development. The surrounding zoning has industrial to the east and west, and part of the south. Also to the south is the planned manufactured development of Conestoga. The preliminary and final development plan is shown here. It is just one lot for self-storage. Access will be from Santa Fe from the south, and there was discussion with Public Works on the actual location of that. You can see the parking for employees will be to the southwest, and then the office space is also in Building A, just across the drive from there. I'd also like to point out the driveway on the northwest corner. That is 0 feet from the lot line, and so staff found that a deviation would be needed for that. The plan shows 3 self-storage buildings. Buildings A and B on the west and the central one are 2 stories, while building C on the east is 1 story tall. Shown here is the landscape plan, and staff had several discussions with the applicant about how best to have the landscape. And you can see the trees are clustered along the exterior portions of the site. There were several evergreen trees added as part of the discussion, and a decorative fence along the Santa Fe frontage was also added. To the west and north, those open areas are dry bottom detention, and then kind of the dotted area you see along all that open space is natural wild grasses. Here you see the elevations for the storage buildings. Staff had discussion with the applicant, and windows were added to the ends of the building, especially on the north end. There was sensitivity to the Highway 56 frontage. We wanted something that looked a bit more upscale compared to what you would regularly see with a storage building. And so we find that, or we believe that that has been met with the changes. Also, entrances were added to the ends of all the buildings. And there were various other small changes, such as, the materials themselves we looked at, because this will be going to the Airport Commission, so we wanted to make sure there wasn't anything there. There were a total of 5 deviations requested. The first I already mentioned is that 10-foot setback. And I'll say now, staff does support all these deviations. The second deviation is for having no sidewalk along Santa Fe. Santa Fe is designated as an arterial, but if you look, there are currently no sidewalks along any portion of the north side of Santa Fe, so we support that deviation. For the third request, this was having a primary front entrance on all the buildings. I believe building C, the one on the east, it doesn't have a entry feature because of how low it is. And it was, the entry features for the other 2 buildings wouldn't fit well with that one. So staff supports this deviation. Deviation 4 is for the transparency requirements. If you add up the south and the north, it would meet it, but so the north has more transparency for the Highway 56 frontage, while the south has slightly less, and so we believe that that evens out, and so that is a deviation that we support. And finally, for deviation request number 5, it was to have a level 3 buffer along Santa Fe. That requirement was due to the manufactured or residential manufactured homes, and while it technically isn't met with all the shrub requirements, it comes close with the evergreens and other trees, and we believe with the native vegetation and the decorative fence, this is a deviation we also support. So staff recommends approval of the rezoning from C2 to CP2 and the associated preliminary and final development plans for Santa Fe self-storage with the conditions in the suggested motion.
Thank you. I believe this is a public hearing item.
Yes, it is, but the applicant can come up and speak first if you want before you open the public hearing.
Is the applicant here?
Good evening. My name is Hillary Zaire from Davidson Architecture and Engineering, and I am the applicant. I'm here on behalf of the ownership team, and I'm here to kind of discuss the project. Staff did a great job explaining our deviations and what we're requesting. This is a 3-building storage unit facility, and the owner believes that there is a need for more storage units in the area. The 2 on the west side are the 2-story, and the one on the east is the 1-story. We are providing on-site detention as well as water quality features. We've worked with staff and Public Works as well as some preliminary meetings with the Airport Commission to get the project approved. But I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Public hearing?
I just have a question on the deviation number 3. Just talking about there's no access to building C. Is that what they said?
It was the primary entrances. Building A and B have primary entrances, but building C, it still has an entrance. It's just not highlighted as a primary feature because it's a one-story building. So if you can see the elevations, you see how there's the columns and the overhang on building A and B, but building C, since it's a one-story, it's just not as prominent.
Mr. Sosa, yeah, there's still an entry to that building C at both ends, I believe, of building C.
Correct.
So there'll still be an entry there, but as was indicated by the applicant, we do have a requirement on buildings for primary entry features, which the primary entry features means doing something substantial with it. So in the 2 larger buildings, that is what they've done, is made those the primary features. But again, because of the scale of that 3rd building being such a single-story scale like it is, the primary entry feature would probably not look as well in that facade.
I got you. Okay. Cool.
So, we just dealt with another storage facility, on the other side of town, and we were talking about lighting and access. So we've got Conestoga across the street. What are you guys doing to mitigate, like, light shining into their homes, or, like, are you taking care of that?
Sure. Yeah, the lighting that will be on site is going to be the shielded, I guess the shields that go on the light posts themselves to keep the photometric plan with the 0 light coverage going around the property. So that's also a requirement for the Airport Planning Commission that they've requested as well. And then at night, the lights that will be on are more for safety features. So it'll be a little bit of illumination inside the building, but mainly it will be like a sensor that if someone walks up to it, it would turn on.
Okay. But it won't be, like, bright and, like, shining through people's
No,
windows?
it won't cross the property line, any of
Okay.
the light.
Okay.
Mr. Hanson?
No questions for me.
Questions for me? Adriana, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's public. This is a public hearing item. Leave everybody limited to 3 minutes. Unless you have a group, unless you have somebody representing a group, that would be 5 minutes. We have a motion to open public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Public,
Aye.
is there any members of the public here that wants to speak or be heard? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public session.
Motion to close the session.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner
Hanson.
Hanson, I'm sorry. I'm just having a heck of a time with tonight.
It's okay.
And Commissioner Hanson. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And,
If there's any other discussion that the commission has or questions?
yeah, the questions are,
I just had one question. As I was reading through the report on page 3, I just need a little clarification. When it talks about the preliminary development plan, the sentence that reads, "The plan represents an improvement over what could have been accomplished through strict application of otherwise applicable base zoning district standards based on the goals of the comprehensive plan, based upon generally accepted planning and design practice." That sentence kind of threw me. I wasn't exactly sure what we were implying there. Can you fill me in on that?
So, you wanna go ahead, Jesse?
Sure.
Can you hear me now?
Do I push to mute or push to?
Push the top.
So that's for the plan development. It's supposed to be equal or better alternative, and so what that means is with the C3 or C2, sorry, this development couldn't happen. As it is, they would have had to meet all these deviations. So as you saw, with the site itself, like for the setback, for example, 10 feet from the lot line, that would have made it quite difficult for this to actually happen. And then the equal or better alternatives, they have proposed like the fencing rather than maybe the shrubs that would have been part of a landscape buffer, or additional transparency on the north end rather than having that 30% on both the north and south ends.
Thanks for the clarification, I appreciate that.
And I think Commissioner Hanson, one of the things that I just want to mention, since the landscape was mentioned, this is planned to be more of a native planting type of landscape. So having the shrubs, having the routine, typical manicured landscape was not in the plan. Again, staff is comfortable with that native approach. It's going to look different than what maybe a lot of people are used to, but in this area, we think that it'll work just fine. It will be a lower maintenance type of landscape.
Very good, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions?
So when you say self-storage, does it mean it's open 24 hours or is it limited?
I'm going to let the applicant speak to business hours or anticipated business hours here.
It's 6 to 10. Gate is open 6 to 10. The office is open 9:30 to 5:30.
Okay. So the gate is open 6 to 10, and then the office is open during certain hours, but people would not be able to access it 24 hours.
Any other further discussion?
So thanks for asking that. Was gonna
Yeah,
be
good.
the next question.
We went through we discussed, I think, a couple of meetings ago.
Yeah, no, they're like,
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, entertain a motion if we,
Might hold on here. Commissioner Mader, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
sorry.
I'd be glad to make a motion. All right, after review of applications Z-22-07 and PDP-22-07, a rezoning from C-2 General Business District to CP2 Planned General Business District and associated preliminary development plan and FDP 2207 final development plan for Santa Fe self-storage dated September 9, 2022, and staff report dated September 26, 2022. The Planning Commission approves the application as proposed and recommends the governing body accept, provided the following conditions are met. 1, approval of all deviations as presented in staff report. 2, administrative approval of AP 2202, administrative plat for Santa Fe self-storage. 3, the construction plans for any utilities, infrastructure, or public facilities shall meet all technical specifications, and public improvement plans shall be submitted and approved prior to the release of the plat for recording. 4, provide a stormwater management note on the plat that reads, all lots shall provide on-site stormwater management facilities in accordance with Title 14 of the City of Gardner Municipal Code and the Gardner Technical Specifications for Public Improvement Projects and design criteria for public improvement projects, and the APWA Manual of Best Management Practices for Stormwater Quality. And 5, the application shall be reviewed and approved by the Johnson County Airport Commission and Board of County Commissioners prior to the release of the plat for recording.
second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Hanson and a second by Commissioner Ham. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
For those in the audience as well as for the commissioners, these items will go before the city council at its October 17th meeting. So just so you're aware, that'll be at 7 p.m. here in the council chambers. The one unusual thing, just so that you're aware, the final development plan does not actually go to the city council, but its final approval is dependent on the city council action on the rezoning and the preliminary development plan. So although you had all of these three items in front of you tonight, that final development plan approval that you gave, because it doesn't go to city council, is on hold until city council takes action on the other two. So if the city council decides that they do not approve of this at the preliminary stage or at the rezoning stage, then your action would be null and void at that point in time on the final.
Agenda item 2, Flint Trails.
Good evening. This is item 2, Flint Trails. It's final development plan and final plat. This development is located at the northeast intersection of 167th Street and White Drive and includes approximately 29 acres of land, containing 7 lots for duplex housing and 2 tracts to be dedicated as open space. This development is located just to the east of the future University Park Apartments, to the south of the University Park Duplex subdivision, and to the north of Genesis Creek Estates single-family subdivision. The rezoning and associated preliminary development plan, Z2206 and PDP 2205, and preliminary plat, PP 2203, were recommended for approval by the Plan Commission at their July 25th, 2022 meeting. The City Council considered the rezoning and preliminary development plan at their August 15th, 2022 meeting and approved ordinance number 2741 rezoning the property from CO Commercial Office and CP2 Planned General Business Districts to RP4 Planned Mixed Density Neighborhood District and the associated development plan. Thanks, Dave. The comprehensive plan identifies this parcel for low-density residential future land use, described as areas primarily consisting of detached single-family homes, but may also include duplexes and triplexes. The layout and design of the final development plan and final plat are in substantial compliance with the approved preliminary development plan and preliminary plat regarding lot and street layout. Staff finds this application to be consistent with the many goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, in particular the goals for housing diversity, infill development, infrastructure, and recreational infrastructure connection. The electric is currently installed in the subdivisions to the east and south and will be extended to this project. City water will be provided from extensions of existing lines along 167th Street, White Drive, and University Drive, and there are existing sanitary sewer lines adjacent to the property as well. Stormwater management plan indicates underground infrastructure and overland routing with drainage into 2 outfall locations. This plan has been reviewed and approved by Public Works Department. Proposed internal street network will connect to White Drive and 167th Street. The internal streets will be considered local neighborhood streets with 5-foot wide sidewalks on both sides of all streets, with 6-foot planting bed between the curb and sidewalk for street trees. Tracks A and B will be maintained by the developer as open space, and a 10-foot wide public trail will be extended along the north side of 167th Street. The final development plan and plat contain block patterns consistent with existing development. The final development plan and plat are in substantial compliance with the preliminary development plan and plat and the Land Development Code. These applications are consistent with the established goals and policies of the cities, and there are no deviations requested with this plan or plat. Staff recommends approval of the final development plan and final plat for Flint Trails with conditions outlined in the recommended motion. And as provided, I did provide you with a revised suggested motion with 2 conditions of approval added to the end, which will be highlighted on your documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission discussion? Oh, do we have the applicant here this evening? I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Cale Joyce. I'm with Flint Development. I have a PowerPoint that you pulled up. Thank you for everyone's time, and thank you for everyone's time tonight and to getting to this point today. Went through these slides a few weeks ago when we first met. Flint Development, Kansas City-based company, predominantly build industrial multifamily across the United States. Current market right now, we've got $1.1 billion roughly under development. We have a pipeline from coast to coast of around $2 billion, and we've completed north of $230 million across the country. Flint, we're the developer. We're using Davidson architecture firm and Polsinelli as our attorney. So for the project, again, as noted, 28.86 acres located to the west of New Century Air Center. We are really looking forward to this site. I think it is one, while there is a lot of for rent product that's being built in the area, we feel that this is one that offers a differential that will add a lot of value to the area. We're composed predominantly of 3-bedroom units, which is one of the biggest factors that separates us from what else is in the area. So again, this is 106 duplex homes totaling 212 units, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units with a community package that includes a clubhouse with fitness center, pool, pickleball courts. We have the walking trails that cut through the development along with surrounding the detention area, and then the sidewalks system that goes around the western edge and then the northern edge of the development. So for phasing of this, we're looking at a 4-phase project starting on the east side and then phasing westward. Phase 1 would be comprised of 44 units or 22 buildings, including the clubhouse, followed by phase 2 of 60 units or 30 buildings, phase 3 of 50 units, 25 buildings, and then phase 4 of 58 units or 29 buildings. So this is a 2-bedroom unit. Wanted to show that we have 2 different elevation types for each unit. So this is a 2-bedroom, 1-car attached garage. There is a different elevation just to ensure that it is not all the same units being replicated throughout the entire development. And then also having a couple photos of different colors, again, just adding variety to the development. This is our 3-bedroom unit. These have 2-car attached garages, again with the 2 different types of elevation in multiple colors. And then these are our 4-bedroom proposed duplexes. So this is a duplex. What we have these set are on corners, so essentially the left one, the left photo on your screen, that would be facing one way with another unit that would be canted essentially 90 degrees from that. Again, these are located on the corners. This is our proposed clubhouse elevations. Again, this will house a fitness center, clubhouse, main area for the leasing office, and then will also be an amenity area with kitchen, barbecue stations, and this will lead out towards, at the back of the clubhouse would be the pool area. This is our landscape design. So we are really trying to put a large emphasis on building this to where, while we see it as a large horizontal for rent apartment community, we really want to ensure that it has the feel of an extension of the community that it's surrounded within. So again, we've been working closely with our landscape designer and then the city's code to ensure that we're meeting all necessary items for landscape design. For tonight, we hope that we can get the approval for this FDP. We are very much looking forward to this development and really putting multiple years of development into adding a lot of value here to this community. Here for any questions.
Question, discussion. Mr. Sosa?
So once you guys get all the approvals, how soon are you guys expected to start?
Sure. So because of winter time, we are tentatively looking at breaking ground in March of 2024. Yes.
23
excuse me, 23, March of 2023.
It's gonna be a long winter.
Yeah.
I have a question about individual landscaping for each home. Like, are you guys responsible for maintaining for the duplexes, the landscaping, or do you have like an HOA, or how are, I don't know
Sure.
how that works?
No, so this will be, it will all be managed by a property management group that we will hire. So all landscaping will be included, so tenants within the property will pay 1 monthly due, and that will have all landscaping included within that.
Okay.
Commissioner Hanson?
No questions?
I have no questions. Adriana?
None from me, thanks.
Great.
All right, I'll make a motion.
You want to put that back?
Yep, we're getting there. While we're getting that back on screen, real quick, I want to note one item in particular. As you know, there's a number of coordination efforts between the University Park development, which is to the west, and then this development to the east of White Drive, particularly stormwater. So we had a few meetings over the last few months with both developers at the same time, talking about how we're going to deal with stormwater. So we think we've got that coordinated. The other item that I do want to make sure of, because staff noted this, the 10-foot wide trail requirement along 167th Street. It is possible that one option maybe we may collect an escrow instead of having them design it and actually build it as part of this, depending on timing with the 167th Street improvement. So Public Works, I wish they were here tonight, they could ask or answer those questions, but there is a coordination issue there, and I'm dependent on Public Works for that answer. So I don't know if it's a surprise to the applicants here. We've been working through Post-Nelly to have those discussions.
Okay, I'll make the motion. After review of applications FDP-22-06, final development plan, and FP-22-09, final plat for Flint Trails dated August 1st, 2022, and staff report dated September 26th, 2022, the Planning Commission approves the application as proposed and recommends the governing body accept the dedication of right-of-way and easements provided the following conditions are met. 1, provide a note on the final development plan listing all deviations from the approved preliminary development plan. 2, provide a stormwater management note on the plat that reads, all lots shall provide on-site stormwater management facilities in accordance with Title 14 of the City of Gardner Municipal Code, the Gardner Technical Specifications for Public Improvements Projects and Design Criteria for Public Improvement Projects, and the APWA Manual of Best Management Practices for Stormwater Quality. 3, the construction plans for any utilities, infrastructure, or public facilities shall meet all technical specifications, and public improvement plans shall be submitted and approved prior to the release of the plat for recording. 4, prior to releasing the plat for recording, excise tax will need to be paid. 5, the application shall be reviewed and approved by the Johnson County Airport Commission and Board of County Commissioners prior to the release of the plat for recording. 6, rename plat from University Park Edition number 26 to Flint Trails. 7, provide street names on the final plat.
I'll second.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Ham and a second from Commissioner Sousa. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Item,
I'm just gonna check with Commissioner Mader just to make sure there was a time delay. So Commissioner Mader, that was an aye in favor of the development as proposed?
Correct,
Okay, thank you.
as the motion read. Thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks. For the applicant's sake, we are going to try to put the final plat on the October 3rd city council meeting. So that's a little bit quicker than usual, but with the final plats as they move forward, we have that opportunity to usually get them on if we can meet the agenda deadlines when those have to be submitted. So we're gonna shoot for the October 3rd city council meeting to actually go through the acceptance of the dedicated easements and right-of-ways.
Okay, agenda item number 3, planning commission officer elections. Open the floor for nominations for chairperson.
I'm gonna interject for just a second. So I'm gonna let you guys have an option here. Number one, since we have 2 commissioners missing tonight, it's really up to you all if you want to pursue this item. We can table it till our next agenda. It is an item that should have happened in May, but as you know, we went through the reappointment process. It took a little bit longer. There were 3 people that went through the reappointment process, so it delayed us this year. If you feel more comfortable in the nominations, having all of the commissioners present for that versus 5 of you.
I do.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So
was
do
gonna
we have a
say
motion,
I'd
maybe just a table?
motion
for
to
next month?
table.
Okay.
I'll make that motion to table the election of the planning commission officers from today, September 26th, to our next meeting in October.
I'll second. Okay. So we have a motion to table the issue or the item from Commissioner Ham with a second by Commissioner Soza. Is there any other commission discussion at this point? Okay, take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 5-0. Table to next month.
Oh, okay, good.
No hurry. Dave.
No, you're
No
good.
hurry. Take your time.
Just
Take
wanna
your
make sure
time.
we're all good here.
Take your time.
Okay, all right, so discussion item, we just have one tonight that I wanna make sure, I walk you through. As you know, last month I gave you kind of a written draft of some proposed changes to the, LDC, the Land Development Code, in relationship to food and beverage, mobile uses, and things like that. So I'm gonna walk you through that, tonight. There is no necessary formal action tonight. This again is just introducing the item to you. I want to make sure that you get this. The typical way I like to do this is put a draft before you, let you absorb that, then give you an overview presentation, and then the next month we can schedule the formal public hearing and things like that. So tonight there's no formal action. I'm going to walk you through a couple items or an outline of what we're doing, hopefully. All right. So now, well, that was interesting. What do you got? There we go. So the draft amendments here are initiated by staff. In this particular case, we've had recent activity with mobile units where they have attached to utilities here in the community that was never anticipated when it came to use of food trucks and trailers. And when the LDC was kind of conceived there, it was really about truly mobile units. It wasn't about attaching 2 utilities on site per se, although it did allow for the use of maybe an extension cord to a building that was on the property or something like this. But what we've had recently, we've had electrical meters installed on sites. We have actually had connections made to sewer lines on site and things like that, which started making these types of uses more permanent or semi-permanent on the site. And that raised questions for us in regard to, do we see these as temporary use permits or do we handle these in different ways? We've also had recent inquiry related to establishing food truck courts or a food truck court, which is a little different here, but if you've traveled to different places, this is where you have an aggregation of several food trucks or trailers that are on the same property. And I've seen them as many as 10 or 12 of those in an aggregated area, depending on the size. And then through our process, we discovered that there's actually a Metro fire permit for mobile food vendors. So our fire district, instead of having a set of standards and the city of Olathe having a set of standards and the city of Lenexa In the metro area, the fire departments have signed off on one metro fire permit. So when these folks come into Gardner, one of the things the fire district does is to see if they've received that permit, because if they have received it from another city, the fire district respects that because they're bought into it as a partner, and vice versa. If they don't have it, then the fire district will do an inspection to issue that permit to them, and we were unaware that that was actually going on in this process. So those are three things that caused staff to start looking at this issue. As you know, I provided you a draft at the Planning Commission last month. In August, I've also put this in front of the city attorney to review. As part of that, there were a few comments that came back. I have not really changed anything from a couple of those comments. There were concerns about maybe being too stringent on a few items. I'm going to let you guys kind of hash that out. We'll discuss that some more, and if we think we need some changes, we can do that. The chapter of the LDC that's impacted is 17.05. It's the zoning districts and standard use section. Boy, why this is doing this, I don't know. This is interesting tonight. So as you go through this, primarily we've made a few changes to the general use standards, or recommending changes. One is to clarify food and beverage mobile as a definition. So the initial part of that you may have seen on the second page of the staff memorandum, really that red type was to clarify the definition of what a mobile element is. And what we want to make sure of is that we reiterate that mobile is really a temporary use of the property. The unit comes onto the property, the unit leaves the property. It's something that is truly mobile. It's not meant to be stationary in there 24/7, operating on the same site and parked in that situation. It's not attached to the ground, nor is it attached to public or private utilities. Everything in that unit is usually self-contained. If you've gone to a typical food truck, that's what you'll find. The propane tank, the water tank, everything's there. The gray water's held there. They leave the site and then they dump the gray water, hopefully in an approved manner. That's the intent, off-site. So they're not intended to be on that site full-time 24/7. Then there's the permanent, semi-permanent use of property. So we've tried to define that. And what we've said here is if it's attached to the ground or it's attached to public or private utilities, it would be considered permanent or semi-permanent, and we would look at it as equivalent to a food and beverage general or heavy use, which would be a typical restaurant, something to that effect. Now, it doesn't have the bricks and mortar, but now that it's tied to one place and intends to stay there, we want to look at that site as a typical restaurant use or a typical food and beverage use at that point in time. We also needed to define food and beverage mobile grouping. The food and beverage mobile grouping was actually in the LDC, but it was not defined anywhere. So that's where this definition comes from. And the intent is to differentiate between two types of mobile groupings. One would be at a special activity or event. So if we had a community activity or we had a special event somewhere, and somebody said, hey, we're going to have 3 or 4 food trucks here, like farmer's market, for instance, or something to that effect, this would be considered a temporary use. It's a mobile use. It's associated with that special activity or event. The other one would be the permanent use of property, as I mentioned. That could be the food truck courts. And that, again, as a food truck court, would be equivalent to food and beverage heavy or general and heavy use. Once we establish those units being there as a permanent use of property, which you may have 5 or you may have 10 depending on the size of the property, we're again going to look at that as a permanent use of that property. What's important about these differentiations between mobile and permanent use or semi-permanent use is they're going to trigger a different level of review, okay, according to what we've drafted. And that review is going to take it away from a temporary use permit, so somebody who drives up and is simply putting the truck on a parking lot. So if we think about it, I want to be careful, I'm going to say some names, but Smoke and Soul, the Chick-fil-A trailer, those folks that are pulling up, setting up at a parking lot for a certain number of hours and disappearing, they're actually functioning like the mobile units were anticipated to be functioning. They're on there, they're there for several hours during the day, maybe a day or 2 a week, and they're moving on to different sites and different locations at different times. So That is that temporary side where we issue a temporary use permit. When they get to be a permanent use, we are now, through the draft materials, proposing that a conditional use permit be required for that, which means they would have to come forward. So if we do get somebody who proposes a food truck court or proposes to place their mobile unit like the sushi group over here to the west has done, where they've connected to utilities, now we want to look at that site to see if it has the capability for car circulation, for picnic tables, for lighting, for landscaping, for any kind of pavement improvements that may need to be made to that property, because it's becoming a permanent use of the property. Just like a permanent use of a vacant building, that would trigger some of those improvements. So in section 1705.050, in the specific use standards and in the temporary use side, we've clarified some of those standards, and I want to make sure that I go through that a little bit with you. I don't want to spend time reading things, but we wanted to indicate and differentiate where certain things are allowed to occur by zoning district and also through the use of a site plan. So when we start looking at just the typical food and beverage mobile use, okay, that would come into play here, we would require a site plan. We want to know about that circulation. So we've had food truck, for instance, that came out to an event at a school for, I think it was a wrestling tournament or something to that extent. We got a phone call about that. And one of the keys for us is, how are you impacting the circulation route for the vehicles for the people who are attending that? So we want to know on the site, where are you placing the truck? How is the pedestrian activity going to be separated from the car activity? We don't want to set up a scenario where people are waiting in line to get their food and they're extending across a major drive for getting people into the event. So that's part of why we require the site plan at that point in time. The other element that we're requiring in the zoning for the temporary type use is that it's going to be allowed in all zoning districts essentially. So when you have a special event or a special activity or a very temporary use, it could happen in a residential area, okay? That may happen at a local park, for instance, in a neighborhood, or it may happen in a commercial district. So we would allow for that, or in vacant properties in commercial and industrial zone districts. So we're kind of watching what's going on here, because we want to have these things located in places where it makes sense and is not taking away from various activities. The other part of this is intermittent use of the property. We are suggesting in the language that we have a little better definition of what intermittent use is. Storing your vehicle there or keeping it there, even though it may be a mobile unit, is not necessarily intermittent use of property. Staff has had a number of discussions, because we do have some people that do have their trailers, I'll say, permanently stored on properties. They're open periodically, they're not open periodically, and we've talked about the hours. Is it the hours that are intermittent? Is it the movement of the vehicle? Even if you move it 6 inches, is that an intermittent location? So we've been debating this one quite a bit. I'll be interested in your input on that part of it. Right now, the way we've primarily, or the way I've kind of drafted this, is to look at it from the standpoint of that vehicle not being placed in that operation on a continuous or a permanent basis. So we can look at that language closer if you want to also. And again, with this kind of standard, these would be temporary use permits, just like we're doing today. All of the units that are out there that we come in contact with, everything from Moose's to Smoke and Soul to the Chick-fil-A, they all get temporary use permits, which are basically issued for the calendar year. So when they start, when they come into us, it'll go to the end of the calendar year, then they have to come and renew at the beginning of the next year. In regard to the mobile grouping uses, again, we wanted to differentiate between the special activity or event and the permanent use. Sorry about that. And this is where we get into the temporary use permit versus the conditional use permit. If it's associated with a special activity or event, then we would look at issuing the temporary use permit. If it's going to be a permanent, then we're going to go to the conditional use permit at that point, okay? And again, the idea with these groupings and these more permanent types of uses is that the conditional use permit gives you all as a commission the opportunity to evaluate if the site is adequate for what's being proposed, if there's any impacts on adjacent properties, for instance, if there's residential around the property itself, then we want to go through that conditional use permit, look at things like business hours and lighting and activity and sound and what's going on there, smells even, because we will get calls at the city regarding any of those things if they're a nuisance to somebody. So be aware of that. Then finally, we wanted to cite the other applicable licenses, certifications, permits, and registrations that are required. That's just a trigger for staff to make sure on our applications that we'll be noting not only do they need their health license, but they also need their fire permits as well. So that'll be noted on the application forms. And then finally, all we did in the temporary use section was try to coordinate some language between subsections Y and P, just to make sure that they work together. So with that, we'll see if this moves forward. I'm just going to open it for general discussion, comments, and questions. Again, as I said, there's no formal action tonight. We can schedule the public hearing and formal consideration for October 24th if that's your desire. So with that, I'll stand ready for questions.
Dave, I think my first question is, when we talk about a food court or a mobile food court, are we talking about an area that could be designated for multiple conditional uses or temporary uses, or how do you envision that working?
So the way a food court usually works is the property owner deems that they would like to do it, just like they would to build a building. Okay.
So first off, it'd have to be
Yeah.
an owner designated their site as such.
Right. So they would go through the process. If the zoning is not a commercial zoning or an industrial zoning, they would have to obtain that zoning. Okay, commercial or an industrial district, and then they would have to go through the conditional use permit process as well. So they would have two items that they would have to do that. Now, the intent is that the food courts, they are acceptable in commercial and in industrial areas, so hopefully as property owners are looking at that, they will already have the zoning in place. So then it's just a matter of getting the conditional use permit for that particular food court. Okay, so they would give you a site plan, they would give you hours of operation, they would give you information about how that's going to operate, and we would evaluate it just like we do any other conditional use permit at that point. We would not actually be looking at the individual trucks because he may or may not have leases or arrangements with specific
That would be up to the owner,
trucks.
is that correct?
Right. Then the specific trucks as they come on would follow that plan and those conditional use permits. That would be requirements for them. But they would have to get a permit as well because we'd have to verify that they have their fire permit, their health permit, all those other things.
This sounds like it could be beneficial because it gives a lot of variety that could be, that we don't have now.
Correct.
Could be very quickly implemented.
Well, I'll say this. We're getting variety one way or the other. There are people, again, staff just didn't sit down here and go, hey, we really need to clean this up. We're seeing an increased amount of inquiries and information about this. I think as people, there's two things happening. As people travel, they're experiencing food courts, the food truck courts in different places that are permanent, and staff in general has been to several of those and has witnessed that and seen that activity. And I think we want to allow the opportunity for that in Gardner, but we want to allow it in the right places. And so that becomes important to us.
What was you and staff's general observations or thoughts on these things as you looked at them in other places around the country?
They can go one of two ways. And I want to be real careful about this. One of the keys with this is that we don't want to create a scenario where there's a perceived unfair competitive advantage in the sense of the food truck court or the permanent food trailer versus the bricks and mortar business that's investing in their property. So one of the things we were sensitive to as we've looked at this is the idea of how do you level that playing field a little bit. So the way to level it in our minds is if the site is inadequate in some physical way. It's gravel versus paved surface. It's got a lack of landscaping, or it's just a leftover thought that somebody is going to use it on a permanent basis. We believe that the property owner should bring a level of investment into that property, maybe not to the equivalent of a bricks and mortar restaurant, but certainly a level of investment that makes that a better situation for customers. So that's one of the concerns, was how do we balance that level playing field? We don't want to be too much of a burden that we prevent the activity from occurring, but at the same time, we want to have a level playing field for all businesses. So that's part of this. We would require a bricks and mortar restaurant. If we got a review for that, we would be looking at how can we bring the site into closer compliance with our codes today. This would raise that same standard. We'd basically be saying, okay, how do we bring this into closer compliance? We may not be able to get 100% of what the code requires because the site may have limitations to it, but we can certainly make it a better environment than simply, having people walk up and potentially park their cars within 5 feet of a trailer.
So from a property owner's perspective, this would be something that can be done. Maybe they can put pads out there, if you will, for the different vendors, and start creating, some kind of an
Correct.
order to that, to where it would be obvious to the public that these are all pads for different vendors, and then the property owner themselves would manage that process.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. And I think it's important when you start talking about the traffic circulation, both pedestrian and automobile, that can occur in a fairly tight space. It's important to have those defined areas. We need to know where the pedestrians are moving. We need to understand how that relates to the food trucks and also to the vehicles themselves.
Thank you, sir.
I guess as I'm sitting here listening to the dialogue, one of the questions that came to my mind was, is there some level of oversight by the city in terms of if a certain permit is going to be issued, and then that would, trigger certain requirements by the business owner, whether it's electrical hookup to an existing utility pole, or whether they have to provide their own. I mean, is there time required by staff to go out and make sure that they're adhering to whatever level of permit that's been provided to them? And then I guess one other side question that I had was just, are health inspections done, or is the health
Yeah.
department performing a periodic inspection?
Yeah.
too?
So from the health standpoint and the fire standpoint, those are other agencies that would do that, not city staff. So
Right.
those are permits and licenses that are issued for a period of time, if you will. So they are just like a regular restaurant. They have a periodic review tied to them. I don't know the specific review time or when that's re-inspected or when it's reapplied for, but I do know that occurs from that process. For city staff on this, there'll be two things that'll come into play at two different points. One is when we're evaluating this and we bring it forward to you potentially for a conditional use permit. I'm not going to say that there are specific standards, because what we will look at is the context of the actual site. So we might treat a site like out west here where we had it was an old restaurant site. It's a vacant property that's surrounded by single family residential. We might have very different standards related to lighting, related to the hours of operation, related to a number of different characteristics because of that context. And that could be very different than something that's located over in the parking lot of Patriots Bank, for instance. So we were very careful. I didn't want to go ahead and see us draft specific regulations and say, okay, this is blanketed every situation. I think we need to be context sensitive to it. I think if we identify specific problem areas, let's say we get even into a commercial area and they do some type of advertising lighting that's way too bright or has too much flashing or has something going on, we can do that through other features in our code that allow us to mute that or bring that back down. Or if we have to, we can address it specifically. But I think right now staff doesn't want to step too far into that and be over regulatory. I think what we want to do is try again to have that balance of let's see where we go with this step, and hopefully it's successful in mitigating some of the issues we've seen.
Okay, so, yeah, I agree with you. I think looking at this when it's presented to us on a case-by-case basis is what we need, like you said, depending on where it's going.
Commissioner Mader.
Commissioner
Yeah.
Mader?
I don't have anything this time. Thank you for putting this together. Definitely something good to review and digest for the next round, I guess, however we proceed. But thanks for putting this together.
Yep.
It was a good edit and update.
I will say what we'll do between now and next month is I will get a little bit closer guidance from the city attorney. We'll probably do a few tweaks or some things. One of the things that we may want to talk about is when do we want these to take effect? Usually they take effect once an ordinance is published. What we may want to suggest is that this begins with the calendar year on January 1. And the reason is because our temporary use permits are issued generally on that calendar year basis. So we have people with permits right now under the LDC that's there. They would allowed to be continued through the end of the year, and when they come in for their permits is when this would then take effect. And I think that would probably be the logical start date. Bob may have some comments on that. He administers the temporary use permits primarily, so I don't know if you have anything you want to add or not.
Nothing at this time, Dave.
Yeah, I did that just to make sure you were still awake, quite frankly. So we may come back to you with a suggested time frame for that. It also gives us some time between now and that October time, because we'll have to publish a public hearing date and things like that, that if we want to put it on hold, we can still put it on hold till November without a problem at that point. We'll probably have to do some type of notification, like I said, before the beginning of the year as to the code changes and how that may impact the people with the temporary use permits. There's
So is the city gonna like start advertising like, you know, we're mobile food truck friendly? I don't know.
Yeah. I doubt that the city will. Yeah, Chamber of Commerce might, as they become more, if we end up with some of these that are more permanent. I was just gone for a few days up in the Black Hills, and I was in Custard, South Dakota, and there's a number of these now where even the restaurant was on Main Street, and just a few doors down or a block down, they had a food truck or a food trailer. So they had their sit-down restaurant, plus they had the trailer for the walk-bys, which was kind of interesting. So we've seen that kind of combination. I think there's some very unique things going on with food trucks in general. We've seen activity, or I've seen activity where they've started out in the food truck and became a restaurant or things. So that's why I see this kind of as an entryway business, and I think Gardner wants to be friendly to those things. But again, we've got to be very cautious and careful, especially with what we've seen. When we started seeing sewer line hookups the way they were getting done, that got a little bit concerning for us, because that's an environmental issue as well if something is done wrong or leaks or whatever. So we're trying to figure out how best to do this, but many of these places have their own social platforms and followings on their own, where they just announce out there on Facebook or whatever, Twitter or whatever, and basically it goes out to a bunch of people. Here's the location I'm going to be at tonight. So I think we want to be very careful with any regulation we do, but also set some of those parameters in place so that we're not just so that we're not doing something that impacts people that are living adjacent to these places.
Dave, if I understood what you're saying correctly, this really sets up an opportunity on multiple levels. One for somebody that wants to step up to owning one of these food courts and managing it, but it also opens a tremendous opportunity, I believe, for the entrepreneurial spirit of people that want to get and develop new concepts of food and bring those to our community, and let the managers or the owners of the courts kind of police their own and make sure that things are. Is that kind of the concept you're looking for?
If we're fortunate, yes. I'm hoping so.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have for tonight. I did put a flyer out. Commissioner Mader does not have that. I sent you an email about a week or so ago, or or whatever, about 2 events that are coming up. One is Community Outlook Conference at WSU is coming up here. They're actually going to conduct it over at the Hampton Inn on October 12th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Let me know. I did get a couple emails back from people who are interested in this. If you're interested, please let me know. I can help with the registration element of it and things like that. But before I do that, I want to get a head count and have good ideas, so I only have to go through the registration one time. I don't have to sit there and go, oh, now I've got another one. Oh, I've got another one.
Would
So
you say the registration will be covered by the?
I'm gonna try to put it underneath our budget, yes. So if we can do that, and I know what the group size is, I can get that put together. The second event, October, I forgot the date. I'm gonna mess it up. I think it's October 4th. I think it was October 4th, which was the Johnson County Airport Land Use Compatibility Public Workshop session. It's the evening, I believe, of October 4th. That's going to be happening out at one of the buildings out at New Century Airport. I will get you information on that too. 6th. Okay, thank you. So October 6th, we'll go ahead.
6 to 8 p.m.
Yeah, 6 to
That
8.
one, I think I can
Yeah.
make that one.
Yeah.
Sounds like it'd be all right
This
for
one
your
I would.
Yeah,
was-
the other one,
Yeah, the other one from 1 to 3 or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
because of the teaching day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So.
that one I can make, the 6 to 8, I can make
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, so that'll be a public workshop. They're gonna have 2 public workshops, and one is gonna be Executive Airport, one is gonna be here at New Century. These are the initial kickoff workshops for the public. So information should be coming out more from the county on that, but I wanted you all to be aware of it, so if you put it on your calendar, you're certainly welcome to attend the workshop as a citizen. I think you would want to see where they're going. They'll probably be asking about issues and other things that they are identifying within that area. So just be aware of those 2 events. Can't think of anything else. Bob, was there anything else? Since I've been gone the last few days, I don't know if there was.
Was there something, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there something that the county planning department was having tomorrow for plan commissioner training? Did you see the letter on that one? I'll tell you what, I'll look it up, and if there is, I'll send an email
Okay.
out to
I
everybody.
don't recall.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Dave.
Anything else?
You can tell we get along really, really well, don't we? This is what happens when I'm gone a few days before the meeting, so just want to make sure. If there's no other questions, I think we're in good shape.
Is there anybody who wants to put a motion to adjourn out there?
Second.
I'll make that motion.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Ham and one by Commissioner, second by Commissioner Souza to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.